Hello, everybody. It is great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, President, Founder of GSD Get Shit Done Venture Studios, premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GST that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. Today, we have our special show. This is Simplenight Presents. I have my repeat guest, Eric Pelletier, and today we're going to talking about from data to delight, using analytics to enhance customer experiences. Hey, Eric, it's good to see you again today.
Hi, Gary. Great to be back.
So you have an impressive career spanning 40 years at firms like Bain and Oliver Wyman. What are some of the early experiences you had using analytics and customer strategy? How was it used 40 years ago, and how is it morphed today, Eric?
Okay. 40 years ago, the world was very different. As far as I remember, we had electricity. Yeah. So we had electricity, but not much beyond that. The internet obviously did not exist. And data, Bain was the first firm that started using data and doing data-driven strategy. And a lot of the things we brought, to the party there was, the ability to collect data, to connect those data, and provide recommendations for our client. And this is the time where the notion of customer experience started to emerge. And Bain major contribution at the time was to realize that customer loyalty was essential, and to get to good customer loyalty. Okay, so the economics prove you want to do that, but then you need to have a fine understanding of what the customer experience is to be able to do that.
So, you focus extensively on private equity, restructuring technology. How have you seen analytics transform these sectors over the decades? What's changed?
Okay, what's changed is now we are in a situation where in the past we have no data. I remember one of my first assignment was chartering a plane to go and photograph a competitor's plant, to assess the number of cars in the parking lot, to get a sense of the number of people working in the plant, to get a sense of the sales of the plant. So obviously this has changed. I mean, we're in the opposite situation where we're literally flooded with data. There's lots of data, and there's way too much data. And if you look, big data started about 20 years ago, but it's still fairly naive in the way it's being used, because people believe that, okay, if we have data, there's a huge step from data to information, obviously. And the whole topic today is, how do I derive interesting information from all the data I collect? So data is worth nothing today. Everybody gets them. It's what you do with it, getting to information, that's what matters.
No, I agree. And so, today our topic is from data to delight. What's a journey look like for a company that's really starting from scratch? What do they need to be looking at, and how do they really enhance the customer experience by using the data?
Okay, so the you really need to start at the basics, and people believe that the basics is the data. But once again, data is not an issue anymore. I'll come back to that because it needs to be refined. The fact is, you have systems today that hoover a lot of data. You're overloaded with data. So to be able to use the data, you need to have models in your mind. And the first model is obviously, what do I sell? And we've had this conversation about business definition. Is actually, surprisingly enough, many companies do not know exactly the boundaries of their product, of their service. So question number one is, what do I sell? Question number two, which is directly relevant to your question, is what is the customer experience, the customer journey? And what's very interesting is that you find that many companies don't know because they don't have a fixed good idea of what they're selling. They even have a worse idea of what the customer journey is. And the only way you know the customer journey is actually by tracking is, okay, I understand what people are buying from me. I understand their pain points. I understand their delight. There's one thing that's very important that people minimize is that I need to understand the fear, because a lot of the whenever you trade money, there's fear involved, and it goes back from when we were monkeys and trading shells on the beach. Fear is involved, and the first thing you do in the customer journey is to alleviate fear, minimize fear, and provides people with emotional safety to get there. So, describing the customer journey is actually a very sophisticated process, and you need to expand it from emotional, psychological, consideration. And I know you're a psychologist, so you really see what I mean. And then get it to, okay, that's the moment where people pay, and then realize that the transaction is not finished when people have paid, because there's after sales service. And very importantly, they will go and talk to their friends and say, wow, this was cool. And real delight is measured by how many friends they talk to and say, this was a cool thing.
You've guided large corporations and startups. What's the most significant difference in how startups versus established companies, and how they, what should they do to approach data analytics? What kind of approach should they use? Because they're just getting started. What do they need to do? Right, the knowledge is power. How do they use it and harness it?
Okay, the difference is huge. It's fundamental. It's essential. If you're a big company, and I've worked with some of the largest company, and you're Pepsi, and you try to track sales, and you're down to 0.01% sales, the market share variation, and you got huge teams, marketing teams, analytics team, and they will help you and drill down the details, and that in Montgomery they need to do that better in Target, and incredibly sophisticated. When you're a startup, it's completely different. Once again, I think the best reference book is the Cold Start Problem, and you realize when you have a startup company, you do things manually. You start, it's like when you're a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, you start a fire, and you go, you know, trying to get it started. This is exactly what you do. So you don't really know the product you're selling. You have assumptions about it. You definitely don't know the customer journey. So this is why it's so essential to talk, understand, interview the people, knowing that the most interesting experiences are when it failed. So if someone decided, they are interested and then eventually they don't buy your product service, it's worth understanding. And then once you have a sense of the journey, then you can start, backing it up with the data. But the data, once again, data is not the issue. Analytics is not the issue. We all have powerful systems on our PCs that will help you. What truly matters is being able to lay down the journey.
So, how do you, what kind of advice do you have for companies to align the analytical insights with actionable business strategies? How do they do that? They take those insights and turn them into strategies for success. What's the best way?
Okay, best way is, okay, so you're collecting data. You have good enough a sense of the customer journey. Um, so that turns it into information. And then you go back to your strategy, and then you're able to infer whether if people do that, there's big enough of a crowd to do it to actually build a business. And then that will tell you, okay, so I was mentioning fear. If you realize that the issue is people are fearful of using your service or not, they have trust issues, okay, your strategy needs to address that. If the process is complicated and you get feedback it's too complicated, then you want to get people to get into a path that is actually simple. So talking about fear, let me use a concrete example. You think of Uber, and they had all these ugly stories about Uber and rapes and things, and people being attacked, and and then they realized that in the way they build the service, they need to provide safety guarantees. So they had to vet the drivers more and check on a few things. So initially, when you're small, you don't know. And so you want to build very short feedback loops that give you the information through data about the customer journey that you can adjust and then turn into a strategy.
So, with emerging technologies like generative AI, what do you think is going to happen in terms of like predictive analytics over the next 5 years, and how's it going to enhance the customer experience? Or I should say, how does it going to evolve? What's going to happen?
Okay, the cool thing about generative AI, it accelerates the process tremendously. So you go back to ChatGPT or whatever LLM model you use, and you ask it, what's my customer, given those set of information, what's my customer journey look like, and it will give you an answer, and that answer can be actually very good. So if you start using that as the basis, you accelerate your process tremendously. So to me, I view it as humongous acceleration. The second thing is, big data was a big topic when it started about 20 years ago, but the fact that people using it like blindly, in the sense that when you have data, you have got matrices, you can calculate all the correlations of the world. But the fact is, if you don't have a model, you don't know what you're testing.
Yeah.
And if it's back to physics, the great scientists, they have an idea and they're testing this idea. They're not starting with, I've got this huge volumes of data and I'm going to test, see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much data out there, right? We have the obesity problem, and the thing is, whoever harnesses that data and uses it can dramatically increase the probability of success for the customer because they understand how the customer feels, how that what they want, and they actually can do that before they actually want it, and that's magical. That changes things. I don't know about you, but when I get on, in Amazon, I don't think is at the right level yet, but still I like it being offered things that I know I may want. If I'm looking at an LC 500, a Lexus, and it knows I like yellow convertibles, and all of a sudden one pops up that's because I've been looking at them lately. One pops up, it's at the right price. it starts it starts making me real interested, and then it starts to like-minded things. That has a Maserati there, it has a McLaren. It starts to come up with all kinds of different options. Quite interesting, but that's part of the being able to target this infobesity, right? How Eric, if you look at the way it is today, and you look 5 years from now, the companies that don't use these generative AI tools, if they don't use them, what's going to happen to them in 5 years? And they're competing with a company that successfully uses them. What do you think is going to happen?
They'll die. Okay, even though there is a fair amount of inertia in the system, but the fact is it's happening today. So I was giving you the example. You're Pepsi. You're looking at super minute market share, and but the fact is when you do that, you don't see someone else coming with a new a soda that tastes the same, or cola that's tastes the same, but actually they're able to deliver it at half the price. And so you're totally blindsided, and you miss that, and then you're out of the market. So if you sell branded products, you're probably protected a bit more, because actually there are people drinking Pepsi for the taste, as we know. Uh, but the for many services, you're not protected anymore. To me, the interesting thing, I was raised in a on the strategy side. We were told about competitive advantage. That was Porter's book. It's how do you have competitive advantage, which in essence is a very medieval notion where you have your castle surrounded by a moat, and so it's very difficult for people to attack you. But the fact is, all this is disappearing, and in service, especially, the situation can flip literally in a matter of days, because once people understand what truly makes your business model work, you got no protection, you got no moats, you got no competitive barrier anymore. So, and this is happening now. I mean, there was a lot of talk about AI and where it's heading. The fact is, now it's happening with all the models in place. But once again, to be able to do that, you need to start with the basic. And the basic is not information, data. The basic is the models you want to test. So there's a lot of, from that standpoint, strategy hasn't changed. You need to start with models you're testing, not the other way around.
No, I agree with you. And so, how important are is analytics, right, in assessing the growth potential? Let's talk about it from a private equity standpoint. Using these tools, how much better do you think private equity can assess the operational health of a company using tools?
Okay, the good thing about private equity is that they're doing this for money, right? So they're not constrained by the past, by culture, whatever elements. They just come in, and what they do, at least some of the firms I know do very well, they assess the amount of data that's available, and then they realize actually the system is completely sub-optimized. So they really have the economic function of bringing efficiency to the system. Um, and it's, psychologically, as I mentioned before, when you're fighting for 0.01% market share, it's almost psychologically impossible for you to consider a situation where you could be wiped off, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Private equity people, they don't care. They're here to make money. They're not attached to the past, the fact that you've been operating in Allentown for 100 years. They don't care. They see where you are. They see where the market is changing, and if they have to remove everything and build something anew, they will do it. So this is literally what's happening now.
So, you've worked with a lot of different companies. What are some examples where you've been able to use tools to be able to help, or strategies to be able to help a company to be able to be more operationally efficient, and and it was based on data. Have you had examples where that's happened, where it's so you go out, whatever it is, workforce management or whatever, where you said this is what we really need to do, and it's all based on data? And how profound was the impact?
My first encounter with the data driven strategy, well, it was two things. One, it was in technology. We were looking at hard disk, and then we realized that it's Moore's law applied to storage, but we realized every year it's a doubling in capacity, and price is divided by about 50%. So the trajectory is clear. You're not on the trajectory, you won't get anywhere. So it's about building volume. So that was my first encounter. Then the first thing I did that was super successful with the data was working for a supermarket chain, and um, and then realizing, I looked at the data and said, well, you know, if we improve this, and this, we can double sales, double profits, not touching sales, really doubling profits. And it turned out, so we was complicated to get systems to get the data. So I had a team of I think 12, no, 16 temps collecting, register information manually. So it was a huge operation getting in, and then we got what we wanted. So we got a sense that profitability by product is very different. Full profitability, meaning return on assets, not just ROS, is actually super differentiated by products. Let's build a system where we start promoting the products that actually deliver the right level of return. And that was magical. That was a switch. So obviously today everybody's doing that. But now we're back in the situation with AI. You're able to be very different, very differentiated, because you start doing this analysis from scratch again.
Yeah, no, and just to get down through a couple questions, how important is it for a startup today to use data to drive decisions on a 1 to 10 scale?
A fair 12, 13. Uh,
So you got to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to die. So
yeah, you're nowhere. You're not a company. What you know some of the companies we're helping together, and um, one of the things I tell them is that forget you're doing anything physical. Just think about the data infrastructure you're building. In today's world, even if you feel you're remote from, fancy stuff, AI, software, all these things, no, you're actually building a data infrastructure. So from the very onset of what you're doing, make sure you build this, because experience proves it's incredibly difficult to change after that. So be open minded. Make sure you start collecting all the data you need. To be able to do that, you need to have models in your mind of what it is you actually need and doing, and where the correlations are. And then you do that. If you think about that notion of correlation, so correlation is what is that with from these data I can infer this behavior, right? This is what modern finance traders do all day long. uh, Forget the money, it's just they're playing with data infrastructure. So I know it's difficult for startup companies to hear that, because they're very excited about their product, their service. They will tell you all the amazing things they're doing, and you tell them, okay, what's the data flow, and how will that data flow evolve over time?
so we're coming up to the top of the show, Eric. Closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Okay, they can get hold of me. My email address is below on at your company. Closing thought is, it's actually, I love your question about startup companies, because this is what we're dealing about. Is that from the very beginning, think of yourself as, okay, you whatever the service you provide, or think of yourself as a data company, and start building from the beginning the data infrastructure you need. At the beginning, not everything, actually few things should be automated, because the problem, once you automate, it's cast in stone, very difficult to change. So at the beginning you really need to test. So you want to test and see what matters, what's relevant. But the whole thing is, remember, you're building two companies. You're building the company that delivers the service you said you would. You're also building in data infrastructure. And to me, the companies that will succeed in the future are, you look at Uber, you look at Airbnb, forget what they provide. Um, you know, They're just data company like Amazon or all the very successful companies. It's just all about the data.
There's a question here. So Nazor asked a question, and the question says, what tools for lead generation would you suggest using? So Nazor, things like we use MailChimp and HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, ConvertKit, Salesforce, Pipeline or PipeDrive. We don't use that, but I've used Zoho, HubSpot, CRM, tools so you can manage the data, right? Landing page builders, lead generation, companies like that, lead capture forms like Typeform, sales prospecting tools. I use LinkedIn Sales Navigator. We also use Apollo.io. Um, in terms of, so there's a lot of different tools out there, just to name a few. So you want data enrichment tools, outreach and automation tools, social media and content, things like Hootsuite. We use that to be able to manage chatbots like Intercom, Drift, or Tidio. Runday is another one that's in our portfolio. Webinar and event management, obviously Zoom, use Zoom a lot. All these tools, it's not just about one, Nazor, it's about how those can work together and create a 360-degree ecosystem for yourself. So the key is to combine the tools for your specific company needs, the size of your company, the target audience, et cetera. Look at the prices. I mean, obviously, Zoho is quite a bit less than Salesforce, but when you start adding the modules up, it starts to become pretty expensive. So just analyze it. You don't want to skimp on it because this is critically important. You want to build a strong foundation for your house.
But
But
at the same time, I think we had a common experience on Salesforce.
yeah,
And if you start, putting all the things that Salesforce wants you to do, and all the parameters you need to input, suddenly you end up feeling that the system is the company, and it is not, and it shouldn't be. This is just support. So initially, you do lots of things manually. Um, because when it's manual, you can check real time. This is where you get the short feedback loops, and then you start getting in the system. And I think I'm fairly agnostic from a system standpoint, because they all tend to do the same thing, which is very basic. You have a contact, make sure you manage the various steps in the process.
yeah. So make sure. So if you looked at the essence, Nazor, a CRM, an email automation, landing page builder, sales prospecting tools, and of course analytics. So go down through. There's a lot of tools out there. I just mentioned a few. We use Google Analytics, but there's Mixpanel and Hotjar that are also there. But these are just some of the tools. The key is you need to explore because you're building a foundation for your house and you're competing with folks that could be a lot bigger than what you are. You need to have those tools to be able to level the playing field. And today, those tools are available. So, Eric, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule
It was a
today
pleasure.
on Simplenight Presents. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We will be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Take care, everybody. And Eric, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thanks to all my audience for joining us. We've now hit almost 1.2 million views, and it's all because of you. Thank you very much.